Welcome to another off-season edition of Spits and Suds. I'm Gavin Spittle of 105.3 The Fan, and so glad to be joined on this episode by Joey Erickson. The name of his podcast, Locked On Stars, where just like Spits and Suds, he's cranking out episodes this off-season, giving you quality Stars and NHL hockey talk. It's Joey Erickson. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic, Gavin. Thanks for having me on once again. This is the fun time of the off season, at least, with all the different movement of players, and of course, we're keeping a close eye and close tabs on the Dallas Stars and what they've done this off season. So, Jim Nill gave us a ton to break down here in the next month or so before the season finally starts to ramp up. So, glad to be on and ready to talk some Stars.
So on Monday, Sean and I recapped everything that happened. And then I wanted to give some breathing room. And today I'm talking with Joey about a couple of things. And then I asked earlier for your questions, Stars NHL related. You guys responded as you always do. So therefore, we'll get to those in just a few moments. But are you at all worried about signing Harley to a long-term agreement, 7 or 8 years? And let me just say, because I'll play bad guy here, what I saw in the playoffs, I understand players have to grow. Listen, it brought up question marks. I'm not saying don't do it. But for me, watching Thomas Harley through the NHL playoffs, that was not a 1 or 2 defenseman.
No, yeah, he didn't look like himself for the majority of the postseason. His scoring touch really, really lacked. He just wasn't quite the same player. And on the flip side, Miro Heiskanen is one of those players that I think just elevates himself in the playoffs. He's almost a point per game guy in the postseason, and that's not what you get out of him for the majority of the regular season. From my perspective, in my opinion, I wouldn't worry about signing him long term. I'm just super high on him. I think he's such a fantastic player, and as you mentioned, I think he just needs a little time to grow. And plus, you have to take into account that it was the first postseason. He's pretty much playing straight up against top lines and top 6 forwards consistently, because the postseason, the year prior, he looked really good because I think he took on a lesser role, and he wasn't having to play against the McDavids or the McKinnons and Makars consistently. So I think this playoff experience is invaluable for him. And I think if you're Dallas, you have no questions to lock him up. I think he can be a top 20 defenseman in the NHL in a few years. And if you can have him and Miro around in your lineup for the future, you're going to be in a very good spot. Now it's about trying to build around them. And we'll see what Lbushkin and Dumba can bring here next season.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, Joey. I personally like the bridge deal and see what we have. But I completely understand about a long-term deal. I love the player. I absolutely love Thomas Harley. Love what he can provide offensively. What I love is he's so good on the rush. And I thought he developed defensively throughout the year. And I think Miro probably has a lot to do with that. At the same time, this is a player that's still young in his career, so I wanted to see.
Yeah.
Lindell came on strong as soon as Tanev came into the picture, but I think it's fair that a lot of people were questioning that contract in the last couple of years. So that's kind of why I'm just cautiously proceeding. With the signings, it does appear as though we will see Heiskanen and Harley teamed up again. I mean, I can't see Dumba as a first pairing defenseman. Can you?
No, I can't. And that's where I kind of stand heading into next season. Because it's not that I don't like the players necessarily, like Dumba and Lbushkin. I just have a very hard time wrapping my mind around the fact that possibly one or both of them could be in your top 4, especially if you're looking for some balance. And I would think Pete DeBoer would love to have Miro on his strong side, but then you basically have to accept the fact that Lbushkin is more than likely going to be on your second pair, or it could be Thomas Harley, however you want to divvy it up, left and right shot. But having Dumba or Lbushkin in your top 4 seems is a bit concerning in my opinion. And I know Lbushkin had some really nice numbers with Morgan Riley in Toronto, so there is some solace in the fact that if he does have to play in your top four, you may get a decent player out of him. But who knows what you're going to get out of Dumba and Lbushkin here next season. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Pete DeBoer kind of throws the pairings together. And we saw last season, it kind of depended on the night, right? He was trying anything and everything to try to get some guys going until Harley kind of found his place with Miro, and then the Stars were kind of off and running. So I'm really curious to see how they're going to use Dumba and Lbushkin, because it's not that they're bad players. I think the contracts are iffy, but I just don't know if Dumba or Lbushkin is going to be the right player for the role that Dallas needs them to be in, and that is a strong top four pairing. I just don't know if you're going to get that type of play out of them. But look, there's a reason we play the games, and I'm intrigued to see it all break down here in the next season.
Well, also Stars fans with the fascination of Liam Mixel. And that's one of the guys that a lot of people were expecting was going to be elevated at the beginning of the year and become a top six defenseman. And it was like, okay, who's going to play with Mixel? And then Suter. And it's like, okay, well, do you really want a rookie playing with someone that doesn't have experience? I actually kind of like that experience of Suter next to Mixel. And now we're even looking at Mixel probably starting the season at Texas, because you really don't have flexibility options with the signing of Niels Lundqvist unless you cut ties with him at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, and I think best case scenario for the Stars, truly, but before the signings of Dumba and Lbushkin would have been Mixel stepping up and proving he can be an everyday NHL player. But I think by the signings, you're kind of getting the idea that they don't believe Mixel is going to be ready to play on an everyday basis. And look, he's still super young. He
Sure.
still may need some seasoning down in the AHL. This could be a Thomas Harley situation where he comes up and he plays 20 or something games, and you realize he needs to go back and get some seasoning, and then maybe he makes the step up, and then he's ready to rock and roll. But the buyout of Suter was interesting, and the loss of Tanev, because I kind of came to the conclusion, well, maybe they feel really confident in Mixel that he's going to step up and play.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Yeah, and then boom, then they go out and sign these three defensemen. And I don't want to be the negative Nelly here on today's episode, because I think there's a lot of positives from all three of the signings. Number one, I think there was a philosophy from Dallas. They wanted to get bigger. And these are, guys that can provide some physicality on the back end and a little more grit. I would have liked it to come in a different package, maybe a Matt Roy or a Brett Pesce or even Shea. But look, with the amount of money and the amount of term that was thrown out this offseason, I don't think Dallas was even in the same ballpark of some of these deals. And they needed some guys to fill some spots. And they got some right shot defensemen, and they had to pay a little bit of the right shot tax on a few of those guys. So we'll see how it all plays out. But I think after the initial shock of what went down, I feel a bit better about where the Stars are. I think the frustration from the fan base and even myself sort of lies in the expectations we had going into the offseason, feeling so strong about where Dallas was. And if you felt like if you brought back Tanev, man, you just needed maybe one or two pieces to kind of fill some holes, and you were going to be off and running. But it doesn't feel like these signings got you over the hump, is where I think the frustration lies. And that's kind of where I stand right now. And I'm always thinking about the playoffs, but you have to get through the regular season first before you can get to the postseason.
Yeah, absolutely. Opportunity once again for Sam Steele. Had a really nice year for the Stars. If there's injury, he does have flexibility, can play wing or center, moved up a couple of times on the lines last year. Nice signing by Jim Nill this past season, and they sign him once again, and that will fill the position of Radek Faksa. And the Stars also this week signed Colin Blackwell to a one-year deal, $775,000, so not a big cap hit. 31 years old, 12 points last year, 44 games with Chicago. Interesting to note, 23-24 Masterton Trophy nominee, Joey, for the Blackhawks. Matt Duchene was the nominee. And if anyone doesn't know, and that's what we try to do on Spits and Suds, is try to teach you a little bit. The Masterton Trophy is named after Bill Masterton, and it's for the player who best exemplifies the qualities of perseverance, sportsmanship, and dedication to ice hockey. If you want to go down a really interesting rabbit hole, look at the life of Bill Masterton. He died in 1968 after hitting his head on the ice, not wearing a helmet for the Minnesota North Stars. That's why if you're at the AAC, you see number 19 retired by the Dallas Stars. So there is a tie-in there. Blackwell, a Harvard graduate, and his story, Joey's fascinating. Graduated from Harvard, but sat out most of his junior and senior year at Harvard with concussion symptoms, really fought his way, was with San Jose, was with the Buffalo organization, and then Nashville, all in the AHL, got a chance with Nashville. Then he signed with Florida. He's been with multi-number of teams. His NHL career, I think we're looking at a quality character guy and a nice depth piece.
Yeah, I mean, just that story in general, I think kind of symbolizes what you're going to get in Blackwell, right? Just a guy that loves to grind, and I think he'll be a perfect piece for this fourth line, along with Sam Steele, who I thought made a fantastic impression last season. It was a really nice signing from Jim Nill to bring him back. He ended up accumulating the second most amount of PK minutes as a forward for the Stars. So you get him there on the PK. And as you mentioned, I think he's sort of became a Swiss Army knife for Pete DeBoer. You can kind of move him up in the lineup. He can play center. He can play wing. He can do a bit of everything. Matt Duchene's a great re-signing. I was a bit skeptical on bringing him back after the postseason he had, but at $3 million, I mean, you can't pass up on a 60 to 70 point guy at this point in his career for $3 million. So you're going to have the same sort of depth you had a season ago. And the reason I still feel really, really strongly about Dallas next season is their forwards. Their top nine is really, really strong. I can't wait to watch Maverick Bourque on an everyday basis. He looked pretty good in the playoff game. I know it was just the one in Game 6 against Edmonton, but I mean, he tore up the AHL, and having him and Stankoven together for a full season should bring fireworks. And Stars fans are going to be delighted to a treat every single night with those two in the lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. Also wanted to note around the NHL, as Joey Erickson joins us on Spits and Suds, Jessica Campbell. She made history, becoming the first woman to be named an NHL coach behind the bench. She was named the assistant coach for the Seattle Kraken. This is an awesome achievement and well-deserved. And to understand Jessica Campbell, she was actually highly touted, multi-medalist as far as international competition. She had spent the last 2 years coaching with their AHL affiliate, gets promoted along with the head coach. So I think it's a great move, but a well-deserved move. And I think that's exciting, and that she'll be behind the bench for the Kraken.
Absolutely. I mean, it's great for the game in general, and we've seen it in other, top four major, sports in the United States with the NFL and just the movement of women in general. And it does hold a special place in my heart in a lot of ways, just because the fact that I covered a ton of women's hockey in college at St. Cloud State, and women's hockey can sometimes, get blown over, but the athletes that come out of the sport of women's hockey is one of the fastest growing sports in the United States as well. I think that can get forgotten. So the amazing strides the NHL is making in multiple ways is a good sign. And it'll be fun to see a woman on the bench for sure, I think, and getting these guys going. So we'll see how it all transpires. And man, Seattle, they were aggressive in the offseason. They signed some big fishes, probably a little bit too much for my taste, but yeah, they're getting aggressive after having a down year a season ago.
The days of expansion clubs rebuilding is no longer the case. It's
Mhm.
win now, especially if you make the playoffs like Vegas did and like Seattle did. Even if it means giving up prospects in the system, the fan base just grows to expect it. So it becomes a little bit tougher to rebuild. But I agree. And, you look at their AHL affiliate as well, Coachella Valley. They've been really good the last couple of seasons.
Yeah.
So Seattle has some good players coming up through the system as well. All right, time for your Q&A to Joey and myself. Let's start with Adam Deacon. Hey, Gavin, I'm happy with the business Nil has done. D looks solid. There is some clout there to help Jamie and stop people taking liberties with our younger players. All in all, happy. I was a little surprised with Nils being retained only because we are loaded in the D. Joey, how surprised were you when Nils Lundqvist all of a sudden was signed again?
Yeah, I was shocked. To be honest, I thought his time in Dallas had came to an end, and I like the player. I think he can still be impactful for Dallas if they gave him a little longer of a leash. But from what I've seen from Pete DeBoer in the last couple seasons, I don't have any confidence that he'll be used in a way that I think he can be successful for Dallas. So it was curious not giving him the qualifying offer and then bringing him back. And I did take a listen to you and Sean's episode from the other day, and he mentioned it's kind of curious from Neil's perspective. Why would he want to come back to Dallas with the names that they just signed? Because I feel like we're going to hear a lot of this, Gavin, next season as well. Dumba and Lbushkin have a lot of experience. They're the veterans that we trust, and even Brendan Smith can be one of those guys. Well, we trust them right now, and and we have to win games because we heard a lot of that this season. And it looks like the room's even more crowded for next season. So we'll see how it transpires. But yeah, it was curious. From the point of view that why would even Niels want to come back to the Stars? But hey, he must really like it here, so it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I think he does. I was watching a video the other day for their schedule release, and he was on it, and he's wearing a Texas flag hat, and obviously there's a lot of international flavor on the Stars roster, so that might have played into it. But I agree with you. There were probably other opportunities where he would get more playing time, so chose Dallas. Let's see what happened. There's also an interesting dynamic between Jim Nill and Pete DeBoer on this one because, it's pretty obvious that Pete DeBoer was tired of talking about Nils Lundqvist toward the end of the year. And, he basically made that point that spending a lot of time talking about a sixth defenseman. There's other players to talk about, but, it is a subject that is quite polarizing among Stars fans. All right, our second straight tweet from England, Martin Crooms. What do you think Jamie Benn and Jake Ottinger's next contracts look like? Who has more points next season, Bork or Stankoven? All right, first question, Jamie Benn, Jake Ottinger's next contracts.
Oh, that'll be that's gonna be a great question. I think if you're Ben and you're the Stars at this point, I think you're looking at somewhere like maybe a 3-year deal, and obviously it will come with a pretty significant pay cut. And I think if you're Ben, you're at the point of your career where he's just trying to win at this point. And he's going to be 35 at the end of next season. So I think you're sort of looking maybe 3 to 4 years. I'm really curious to see how Dallas plays this, but Jamie Benn will have the opportunity to do something that could really help out the Stars, and maybe he'll be willing to take a hometown discount, because if you can drop him down just a smidge, it can open up a lot for the Stars in terms of making the team around him better. But you also have to factor in you're going to be paying guys like you're going to be paying guys like Johnston and Stankoven. Of course, I actually mulled around the idea with Jake Ottinger with Uri Kralik a few days ago on Locked On Stars, and he basically kind of came to the conclusion that you're just going to have to accept it's probably going to be 7 to 8 years, and you're looking around $8 million, right? Yep. $8 to $8.5 million. Yep. But look, he's a number one goaltender. And I think he's at his best. He's a top 5 goaltender in the NHL. You just have to pay him. And I think the Stars would be really happy if when you sign Otter long term. And I know he can be a bit of a polarizing player as well for Stars fans. I don't quite see it. I just see the positives in it. I just think he's at his best when you need him to be at his best. So sign me up for Jake Ottinger long term. Ben is a little bit Ben is a little bit different of a discussion. I would love to hear your thoughts on what you would do with Jamie.
Yeah, I think I'd offer him a 2-year deal, $8 million total, $4 million a year. If he wants a no trade clause, I'm willing to give that due to the dedication he's had to the organization. But I think you have to be tough on this. Even if he puts up big points, because you have to think of the future, and that Wyatt Johnston contract, as you mentioned, is quickly approaching, and obviously Jake Ottinger's contract. So I would offer that to him. If Jamie Benn wants to go elsewhere, I think he's going to want to stay. And I think he understands what he has here. We talk about lines next year. My projected line, which I would love to see, is Bork, Stankoven, because of their familiarity with the Texas Stars playing together, and Jamie Benn. To me, that's a heck of a career ender for Jamie Benn if he can be on that line. So, it's all about who's around you. Even the elite players need surrounding cast members. And look at Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn, since they've had the cast form around them. They're able to separate, and they're able to elongate their careers as far as we're not really looking at those contracts anymore and say, oh, my goodness, they're albatross. We're not looking at that anymore. So, I would say that for Ben, for Ottinger, I think you're looking at the $7 to $8.5 million range for 7 to 8 years. Yes, I think to retain him. And for those wondering, it's really tough to find a netminder that is as good as Jake Ottinger. And I understand he had a down year, but guess what? Connor Hellebuck had a down year. UC Soros has had a down year. There's only so many. And you look at the one that won the Stanley Cup, Bobrovsky. He makes around 10, I believe, per year. And that contract was highly scrutinized, Joey.
Yeah.
And no one talks about it in the last year and a half, because he has kind of rebuilt his career and came on massive the second half last year. And they made that Stanley Cup run. And then this past season, he was good all year long. So I think goaltenders, you kind of have to ride the roller coaster. So I think that's a very fair contract for Jake as well.
Yeah, and I think we forget too. I don't believe Bobrovsky started the playoffs a year ago for Florida.
He didn't.
I think they went with Lyon.
Yeah,
That's just the way it goes sometimes. And I think Stars fans have sort of been a bit spoiled with the goaltending. We've always had pretty good goaltending, at least in my lifetime. I was born in 99. For the most part, Dallas has had really, really good goaltenders. And you can ask teams like the Kings before they had Jonathan Quick, and look at Edmonton for the most part.
Yes.
They've struggled to find goaltenders, but you get that one, you win a ton. And sometimes you get a couple of cups in the bank for it. So you just got to lock them up, keep them in town, and hopefully you get enough good play in front of you, and you can get the job done.
You nailed it. It's not talked about enough. Look how much better Jake Ottinger was when Chris Tanev arrived and that defense settled down. And then you look at Vasilevsky in Tampa. Well, he's got a Norris Trophy candidate year in and year out, and Hedman in front of him. And then you look at Florida's defense, which was vastly improved. Then you go up to Edmonton. Yeah, absolutely. Goalie came up big for them, but at the same time, they got so much better defensively, both with forwards and defensemen. You have to look at the defensemen around you too. So I think a steady decor around Jake Ottinger will make a big difference. Chris Barnard at CBarnard82. People wanted, myself included, physicality. Jim Nill delivered it. The defense will have everyone's head on a swivel. Lbushkin is very aggressive. Dumba may regain form and become a solid number 4. Mixel will play most of the year in Dallas as he is the next Hatcher. Wow, that's high expectations, Chris. I'll take it. He goes on to say, I wanted Matt Roy, but teams add Roy, Walker, etc. long-term because they don't have Harley as their second-best defenseman. Either end up with less allocation to your forward core or you have long-term cap issues by overspending on free agents with term. I mean, well said, Chris. I think that's a very good tweet, and I absolutely love our Spits and Suds listeners when they can deliver like you guys deliver. The only thing I'll say about Lbushkin is there's a reason he's been on a few teams. And it reminds me, Joey, of that 6'5" quarterback where it's like, yeah. Everyone's avoiding the 5'11", 6 foot guy that wins national championships. But man, that 6'5" guy, when he hits his targets, that's, so they go on the height, the weight, they see the highlights, the physicality. But my question is the sustainability, because many teams have had Lbushkin.
Yeah, and I know he played pretty decently in Toronto, but you're right. He has jumped around a bit in his career, but size matters, Gavin. It really does. Sometimes they're they're the shiny toy on the market, and you're right. It's the 6'5" quarterback. It's just really, really hard to pass up on something you can't teach. And Dallas, after probably striking out on guys like Matt Roy, who I would have loved to have here in Dallas, because I'm sure they reached out on players like Roy and Montour and Sean Walker, but they realized they couldn't match the money or term, whatever the case may be. Then, well, you might as well get beefier on the back end. And plus, we say this ad nauseum, but it's a copycat league. And you look at a team like Edmonton, who there wasn't a ton of big names on the back end. I know Ekholm and Bouchard are really, really good, but other than that, I wouldn't say you're talking about the deepest D core in the Western Conference, but what they did have was some size. They were pretty big on the back end. And after getting knocked out in the Western Conference Finals the last 2 years, I think Dallas kind of ran into a problem of fatigue, right? Mental exhaustion and physicality, that they're thinking, hey, we just need to be bigger and just have a little bit more beef on the back end so we can just kind of get through the Western Conference Final. If we have some size and some grit, maybe we won't to get worn down as much with some of the size on the back end. And look, just like the wonderful listener just said, hopefully Dumba or Lbushkin turn into great top 4 players, and then you're looking at home runs.
Yeah, absolutely. From the beautiful country of Canada, our friend Jordan at Harper Hockey Fan writes, do we have any expectations for a Thomas Harley signing, AAV, and the number of years? So AAV is the average and the number of years. So, Joey, one thing that I saw that kind of said, okay, this is where it starts and it's going to go higher, is Sean Durzi signing for Utah, 4 years, $24 million, $6 million a year. So to me, Thomas Harley is a better defenseman than Durzi, kind of about the same age. And to me, I would say that Harley starts probably around 7. If it's going long term, I'm thinking 7.5 to 8 a year.
Yeah, that's where I kind of sit right now, and I think Sean Durzi is a great kind of benchmark for the market of Harley. And yeah, and look, you look at the Dallas Stars cap space right now; it's just over $7 million.
Yep.
So it kind of lines up perfectly for that number. I think if you're going to a bridge deal, what you're thinking 4 years, and it could be somewhere 4.5 to 5 million. If Harley's willing to accept that. But as I alluded to a bit earlier in the episode, I'm fine with kind of locking Harley up. It gives you one less decision you have to make when guys like Johnston and Stankoven roll around. So yeah, you're probably looking somewhere around $7 million for what could be 6 to 8 years.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what his camp wants to do. And a lot of times, for those that don't know, it's the players' camp. Do they want to take the guaranteed long-term deal, or do they want to risk it? Because a bridge deal doesn't pay you as much, but you could get a bigger payoff after that. You get a nice short-term payoff, sure, because you get a big raise, but you do have to get some years. For instance, Shea Gottinger is up after next year, and he just signed it just seems like yesterday, but he signed a bridge deal. Okay, let's see. Let's go to Tyler King. What are the biggest questions this roster has to answer to show that they can go beyond the last 2 years, and who are the key contributors? Example, Nils Lundqvist finally figures it out. I think a good one is Maverick Bourque. What will we see out of Maverick Bourque? All signs point, whether it was up in the Quebec Junior League, which you're familiar with, Joey, or, go higher than that, and really picked it up in the second half of his first AHL season, and then just blazes all season before getting the call up and won the AHL MVP. So, burning every single level. And to me, it's like if Maverick Bourque can put up what Stankoven and Wyatt Johnston has done, and I think people are expecting that, so we kind of have to lay back a little bit on the expectations, but, you can certainly see that happening, and that will, I hate to say it this way, but make you forget about Joe Pavelski.
Yeah, because Joe had a tough postseason sure, and Father Time finally caught up to him, unfortunately. But he did play his best game in Game 6. I know it was the last game of his career, at least what it looks like up to this point. I would even take it a step further and sort of say that you're looking for the players like Bourque, Stankoven, and Johnston to almost take control, take the bull by its horn, so to speak, and really start to push the franchise. Like, this is the next core of Dallas Stars hockey for the next, 5 to 10 years. I think if you get the elevation of Bourque and his play along with Stankoven, then that will bode very, very well for you moving forward in the future. One of the things that I think really hampered Dallas in the Western Conference Final against Edmonton, but besides just the exhaustion and mental fatigue, was I thought Jamie Benn was one of their best players in that series.
Yes,
and I think Jamie Benn is a great player, but I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. We need Wyatt Johnston to be the best player. We need Jason Robertson to start being the best players in these big moments, the guys that really carry the load offensively. I also think they're probably another top 4 defenseman away from getting over the hump. So I'm really, really intrigued when we get closer to the trade deadline next season. Is Dallas going to be in on a player like Chris Tanev, like they did from a season ago? I think they need one more defenseman to bring into the mold to really lock it down on the back end. And I think Dallas is in a good shape. I know I think I overreacted probably after Monday, like many Stars fans did. But now that we've had a couple of days to breathe, look, they're not far off from where they were, a season ago. Now it's just about finding the right pieces to add to the mix, and hopefully they can get it done. But man, it's really hard, and Seguin said it in the press conference after Game 6 against Edmonton. You have to lose a bit to find a way to win. But what does he know, right, Gavin? He won it in his first year.
Yeah, there are a lot of question marks, but I mean they're good question marks. How is Evgeny Dadonov? I'm assuming he's going to start on the fourth line, and we're going to have an all new look fourth line with Steele, Dadonov, and it could be Blackwell or it could be someone else. So, how does that happen? How did the lines gel? Do they move Wyatt Johnston up to the first line? And how does that affect Robertson and Hintz? So there's some question marks. Or do they move Tyler Seguin up? And, if so, how does that affect the Duchesne line? So there are so many different things, but the core's back together for the most part. And I think, as you mentioned, that certainly puts them at a competitive advantage. I did want to mention the Harry Wagstaff. This is based on Monday, and Joey, I'm mentioning it because you listened. He says, Gavin White, really? With Sean Shapiro.
Yes, yeah.
When I mentioned the prospects camp and Gavin White was mentioned, Sean gave his thoughts. So that was fascinating. Of all things for Sean just to get emotional about it. It was just really funny, and we've gotten some great reaction about that. I need to go to Denver to visit Howie He, and he says, always welcome to the Mile High, albeit we are moving back to Big D next year. Congrats. That's awesome.
Oh,
As you can tell, I'm reading these as we go. Hoping we can catch a game together. Heck yeah, man, we'll do it up. While the lack of big-time signings was disappointing, it's a sign that our team has been really constructed well. Felt like teams were really overpaying this offseason. Joey, I can't point it out enough. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that when we look at the Tanev trade, the fact that Jim Nill had a first-round pick this year and didn't give up much to get arguably the best trade deadline acquisition, a lot of times that's forgotten in the mix. Everyone says, oh, my God, I can't believe the rights were traded. I can't believe Tanef's gone. But you really didn't give up much to get him.
No, and look, I think if you told us in February he was going to be a rental, I think a lot of Stars fans could have accepted that. The frustrating part was he just felt like a perfect fit, and you wanted him to be here in Dallas. And unfortunately, it just wasn't going to be the case. And as you mentioned, Jim Nill did not give him did not give up a first round pick. And I think he even mentioned in the press conference on Monday as well, Tanev was what, only on the books. It was under $2 million, right? that was his cap hit, here in Dallas because of the salary retained by New Jersey and Calgary. And you also have to give Jim Nill some credit that he at least got something for Tanev. I know the return wasn't fancy, just a 7th round pick in 2026 in Max Ellis, who will probably begin the year with Texas, but at least they got something out of him. And I don't know about you, Gavin, but you could not have signed me up for a 6-year deal for a defenseman that's going to be 35 next season in the no move clause. That just, man, there's just no possible way you could do that.
No. And Sean pointed out the tax implications for Tanev leaving Canada, and that made sense. And he's from Toronto, and yeah, I agree with you. I mean, we'd be looking at January of his final year. He's 41. It's there are only so many Chris Chelioses that come around, and look how long ago Chris Chelios played. So you just don't have guys that can last, especially since Tanev plays such a physical game. So it's, if he does well in Toronto, great. Toronto has a win now mentality. They have marquee talent. They want to bring a championship to that city. So therefore, I think it's a very strong signing for Toronto, but I think Dallas is sometimes the best moves are the ones that you don't make. Michael Moore, as a current projected lineup sets, how would we compare playing a team like Nashville, who seems to take a giant step forward? Also, next year, do we see the team go away from the less is more title, and you start seeing people like Rope, Wyatt, and Robo try to assert themselves?
I think that's a great question. I'm curious your thoughts on what Nashville did, because obviously Stamkos and Marchessault were two pretty big fish. I mean, you can throw Shea into that conversation, but they're in their mid 30s. I really like Nashville, just the way they're built. I think adding Stamkos and Marchessault is two great pieces. I would not be surprised if they won the Central next year, especially with Jussi Saros, fantastic number one, and you still have Roman Josi kicking it on the back end. I just think they're a really deep team. I thought they were really good last year, and now they had guys like Stamkos and Marchessault with experience. I just feel like they're going to make a massive step.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Brady Shea was also a nice acquisition from Carolina, can work the power play. You might see him on that, first line pairing with Josi. So that's a quality defenseman. Also picking up another solid defenseman in Alexander Carrier on the blue line. Scott Wedgewood, I think, is a real nice signing. Gives Saros some break. Wedgewood got what he wanted in a multi-year deal. So, yeah, I think Barry Trotz was very good as far as working the phones and free agency. And it's interesting because Nashville is talked about now as a destination city, and the growth of Nashville. We talk about the tax implications. There's just a lot of reasons. Yeah. The crowd, the fan base is they're into the games. They love their Preds. So I wouldn't be surprised if they won the Central. You and I are going to do a Central off-season ranking. But yeah, I think when you look at it, it's if we're looking ahead, and it's tough to do right now, I think you're looking at Colorado, Dallas, Nashville, and then Winnipeg.
Yeah, no, I think that would definitely be your top four for the most part. I think all those four teams are in the mix, and I think it truly is a toss up of who could win the Central, which will make it really intriguing. And Colorado, talk about the question marks they have,
Yeah,
with Lbushkin, and who knows with Landeskog, is he going to be able to be the player he once was? I don't know. So they have some questions and some cap concerns. So yeah, it's going to be really, really intriguing next season. I think a lot of Stars fans were biting their nails on Monday when Nashville goes out and adds Stamkos and Marchessault, and it felt like Dallas was just watching this happen while they continued to get better. But Dallas should be right in the mix. And look, I think they're going to be a top three team in the Central Division all year long, like they were the past couple of seasons. And hey, it's a lot better than being the seventh or eighth best team in the conference and trying to claw your way into the playoffs like it was for about a decade.
Absolutely. I'm also going to throw something else in the mix, and that Spits and Suds listeners know I've been mentioning this. Utah made a splash, and just be careful. That could be your one that's fighting for a wild card spot because defensively, they are going to be really good next year. So might not be there yet, but the days of Chicago and Utah being like, I don't want to say easy wins because the Stars lost. Yeah, afterthoughts because the Stars lost in Chicago last year. But the Central is going to be an absolute grind. All right, our friend Jeffrey Fink laces out Finkel. What are your thoughts on the growth of hockey overall in Texas? Where do you see the growth taking it in the next 5 to 10 years? Joey, if you don't mind, I'll start. I think it's absolutely awesome what we've seen. I think it's great. I'm going to pump your tires for a second that you're doing and you're putting out Stars podcasts daily. We're trying to put out as many as we can. I think Stars content for a while looked like it was going to suffer with the Athletic not covering the team like it once did. But I think a lot of people have picked up the slack and want to give credit to Taylor Baird. She's done a good job with NHL.com and defending Big D. So kudos to her. Sean's done a really nice job as well on his Substack. So a lot of us are trying to keep it going. The other thing is the emergence of female hockey in DFW and that Stars system for the youth, both with girls and boys, are seeing some amazing results. When you look at Simpson being drafted by New York in the PWHL from Frisco, when you look at Hannah Bilka being drafted out of Capel by Boston, you look at these people playing Division I hockey now, and it's growing. And then you look at on the men's side and the emergence, and it used to just be we'd refer to just the Jones kids, and now there's a lot more than the Jones kids and Blake Coleman, and it was great to see Stefan Neusen out of Plano getting a nice contract. And then we look at the Allen Americans and the success that they've had as far as a minor league organization. So a lot of people like going to their games, and that's super cool. And then you look at junior hockey. The World Championships are coming here to DFW between Dallas and Frisco. So sorry to get on a soapbox, but I love the question from Fink because I think this thing is just like, if it's a stock, I am buying DFW as a hockey city right now.
I co-sign 100%, and I think the Dallas Stars should be given a ton of credit for what they've done for the game. I like to say that I kind of grew up with the game of hockey in Dallas, being born in '99, of course, and the Stars winning the Stanley Cup, and who knows how many travel teams there were at that point. But by the time I was 8 to 10 years old, man, there was 20 teams I could have played for in the DFW area alone. Travel hockey, whether that was house as well. The Dallas Stars just do a fantastic job with growing the game, and now they're doing all these multi-purpose Star Centers as well all over the place in the Metroplex. And that's just a great sign for the game. And you mentioned all the wonderful DFW athletes that have made a name for themselves at the Division I level. I mean, you can even look at the U.S. national team development program, the amount of kids that are coming from the Dallas Stars Elite in that program that is running out of North Texas is truly amazing. And I think it sort of is becoming sort of a hotbed. It's going to become one of those underrated cities in the United States that creates talent, right, and cultivates talent. And DFW is going to reap the rewards of that in the next 20 years. I mean, I think it's going to be really, really cool to see the population demographics in the NHL and how many players from each state are represented. And, Minnesota, of course, they always are usually number one, but I think Texas is going to be sneaky. And maybe we're talking, 30 years from now, maybe it's a top 5 state in the United States represented just because that's the amount of talent that is coming here to play. And I think there is no better symbol than the World Championships coming to Dallas. I think that's kind of all you need to know. Is that they're coming to 80 degree or not 80 degrees, 100 degrees Dallas Fort Worth to come play hockey. That's truly amazing.
No, you're absolutely right. And then you expanded even more with the success of the Texas Stars, and that's been impressive. And Stephen Meserve, who covers the Texas Stars for 100 Degree Hockey. As I keep mentioning, him and Sean have a book out called We Win Here, which talks about the history of the Texas Stars and the Dallas Stars, the players in between, some good stories. So check that book out and support those guys if you can. Zach Bradford asks, I have seen both. How many years is the Lbushkin contract? 2 or 3? I would much rather have 2. Well, you got 3.
Yeah. I know there was some curious questions about that.
I didn't see anything as far as a modified no trade or anything like that. So it could be a tradable contract. But 3.25, let's see what happens there. Fuzzy Wuzzy Boom Boom. Since it was the anniversary of the Tyler Seguin trade, how do you think we fared in the deal? Do you think he's been the type of player to command his contract? Was it worth the trade? So the big pieces going to Boston was Riley Smith, who has turned out to be a really good NHL player, very solid, and Joey Erickson, who was a fan favorite here. I think it was well worth it, Fuzzy. I think in many ways it helped change the franchise. I think Seguin has been really good here. His first few years, borderline. I hate using the word elite because it's used too much, but top tier as far as, and the other thing is the evolution of Tyler Seguin as a two-way player has been really impressive. I think Ken Hitchcock helped a lot with that. I think it's been a great trade for Dallas. The contract, while a couple of years due to injuries, I think could be questioned, and I'm going to chalk it up to injuries because when we saw Tyler Seguin this past season healthy, it seemed as though the speed came back a little bit, Joey, as well as the confidence. And I think that line really, really gelled. There's an argument to be made that for many games, that was the top line of Dallas.
Yeah, I think it was their most consistent line all season long. What was Marchment, Duchesne, and Seguin. And I think a big part of that was they were healthy for most of the year, besides a stretch where Duchesne missed a couple of games. And I know Seguin missed, a couple of weeks with a lower body injury. And yeah, we've started to see a bit of a resurgence from Seguin. And in the last 3 years, 24 goals, 21 and 25. I think that's what you're asking out of Tyler Seguin at this point in his career. Can he give you 15 to 25 goals a season? And in his prime here in Dallas, 5 out of the 6 seasons, he scored over 30 goals. He was elite, man. It was so fun to watch him on the power play, and he used to sit on that circle and just completely hammer pucks.
Yeah.
And he used to score a ton.
Yeah.
And that also speaks to his evolution of a player, right? That's just not quite what he is nowadays. He has really solidified himself as a nice two-way player. And he really ushered in, I think, the next era of hockey in Dallas after 2012, right? He's kind of been the story, him and Ben, for almost a decade now. And you have to give him his props there. I know they haven't been rewarded with a cup, but I think you can make the argument that Dallas didn't doing them that many favors in the team they put around them. But I think for the most part, Tyler Seguin has delivered for the Dallas Stars.
Yeah, I agree. Flo Wee, professional hockey player over in Italy, says Stanley Cup should be awarded latest May 31st. Boy, I agree with you. I think we have to tighten this up. And I understand playoff travel, and I understand collective bargaining agreements, and you can't push this thing too close together, and nobody wants to get rid of the schedule as far as lessening the games. But I'll tell you, Joey, that is tough. And granted, they get to raise the cup in Florida, so they're not really worried about recovery. But, these guys are going in the next month and a half. And it's like, no, that's a lot of work on the body for Edmonton and Florida, not to mention, and I know they have separate staffs for this, but to win a cup, to do a parade, and then a few days later, you're handling a draft. I will say the counter argument to this is I love that the NHL is becoming like the NFL in that we can talk about it year round with free agency, with the draft, with so many things going on. The trade deadline is bigger than ever. But I agree. Let's end it in May because, boy, this was a long season this year.
And I think to your point about the NFL, and it's basically become a 365, 24/7 conversation. I think it would honestly help the NHL if they just gave themselves some breathing room, because they lifted the cup on, was it a Tuesday or Monday? And then it was 2 days later, you're having a draft. It just felt like there was no real build up towards the draft because you just don't have the time, because you have the Stanley Cup final, which is the pinnacle of your sport. If you could provide some sort of buffer, it allows for those conversations and discussions to really cultivate. And I think that brings even more eyes to the sport, because like my parents, so to speak, like my mom, she's like, "Oh, there's a draft already? Like, didn't they just do the cup?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, it's kind of crazy, isn't it?" and I know my mom is not the target demographic for the NHL, but sometimes it is a bit quick for people that are just trying to keep tabs on the sport. And if they give them some breathing room, I think discussions can thrive. And it could become a bit more like the NFL, where we are really talking about it 24/7.
Joey, you are a beast, my friend, and Locked On Stars continues just like Spits and Suds with episode upon episode. Congratulations on your success, my friend. I feel like yesterday you were walking these halls at 105.3 The Fan, and now you're a big-time star.
Well, I appreciate it. I don't know about that, but I appreciate all your help and support, especially everybody at 105.3 The Fan for sort of giving me a platform to talk about the Stars, and now Locked On Stars continues to allow me to do that. So I have a ton of fun, and as always, thank you so much for having me on. Always appreciate hopping on with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And just a reminder, we got a couple last week. If you get a chance, and you can leave a review for Spits and Suds on Spotify or on Apple, and you can do the same with Locked On Stars. If you like what you're hearing, please give us 5 stars would be nice, or just write in the comments what you like about the Stars. You can also reach out to me directly at GJ Spittle as far as what you would like to see for future episodes. Hey, Gavin, I've always wondered about this. Try to do the research, and maybe we can come up with a program for you. So we'll have to do some research about it, but that's what I love. This is an interactive podcast. This is all about you just as much as it is about us. So we love the teamwork, and thank you so much for helping us move this thing along. So for Joey Erickson, we're so thankful he could jump on with us today. I'm Gavin Spittle. Thanks once again for listening to Spits and Suds on 105.3 The Fan.